Some of the companies out there, they lack leadership. They have the only vision they have is bottom line vision. It's like buying a new company for myself. You got to make sure the culture matches. Sometimes return on my investment is not the important thing, because if I do the right thing, if I stop chasing money, money will start chasing me.
Hello, friends. I'm Adam Loveridge. Welcome to the Home Services Marketing Podcast, Growth to Acquisition. I'm the owner and founder of Job Calls. We're a home services marketing agency specializing in heating, air conditioning, plumbing, and remodeling contractors. For more information about Job Calls, visit us online at www.jobcalls.com. Hello, and welcome to the Home Services Marketing Podcast, Growth to Acquisition. I'm Adam Loveridge with Job Calls, and I'm really excited about this edition. I'm being joined today by Lawrence Snow with Valley Plumbing here in Lehi, Utah. And Lawrence, thanks so much for joining me here this morning.
Good to be with you, Adam.
Hey, it's great to have you. So Lawrence and I met, maybe about a month or so ago out at the Utah Plumbing Heating Contractors Association golf tournament. And I wanted to get Lawrence on the show here because he's got quite a bit of experience in the, I guess you could say, the acquisition game when it comes to HVAC and plumbing companies, and has some experience with private equity. And I thought that it'd be just a really fantastic idea to get on and talk to our listeners about some of the ups and downs, if you will, the benefits and pitfalls of selling a business using private equity. That's kind of what we're going to be chatting about here today. And Lawrence, maybe if you would give our listeners just a little bit of your background and kind of where you're coming from.
All right. I grew up in southern Utah, in St. George, Utah, about 100 miles from Las Vegas. Started my plumbing career there. A neighbor of mine was a plumber and working on jobs out of town in Ruidoso, New Mexico, and Albuquerque and Des Moines, Iowa. And we flew back and forth. He had a pilot's license and a plane, and I was trying to get my pilot's license at the time. The business slowed down there. I mean, we had about 50 people working for us there in a little itty bitty town of St. George. And so I moved to Las Vegas to an uncle of his that had a plumbing company called Larkin Plumbing, and worked there for a little bit. And then I worked for another company as well, and had the opportunity to purchase a one-truck company called Anytime Plumbing, and grew it up over the 18 years we owned it. We had at one time about 350 employees working for us. I sold the company to a consolidation company back in 1999, back in the first consolidation movement, and had the opportunity to work for them, doing some acquisitions and running the Las Vegas operation, and worked for them for about 3.5 years. And then it was time to move on. Immediately, I was picked up by Mr. Reuter, and I was the vice president of business development for Mr. Reuter for about 3 years. So I handled everything outside of Waco, Texas, which meant all the franchisees. I had a team of 7 regional managers working underneath of me, and we had about 200 franchises at that point in Canada and United States. Then I went to work for the Quality Service Contractors, which is part of the National PHCC, as their business coach. And we grew that up. There ended up being 3 of us there. And I loved that position. It was a lot of fun. It gave me the autonomy to do what I wanted to and what needed to be done for operations. It wasn't a franchise. So you give the typical customer several choices of which one of these choices looks best for you. And during that time, I helped my son Robbie start Valley Plumbing here in Salt Lake area. And he was the plumber, and I hired a marketing guy up front to help do the marketing, and we went totally digital. That was when Yellow Pages was just phasing out about 14, 15 years ago, and had the opportunity at that point to just consult him because I was traveling a lot. Almost every week I was gone. Unfortunately, on the weekends, he knew when I was coming home, and he would call and tell his mom that he'd have my uniforms ready for me, and I'd meet him at a job site on Friday afternoon type of thing. So it was a lot of fun. It came to the point where travel got too much. It was time for me to go help Rob. The company was growing extremely, extremely good and fast, and it was profitable. And it was time to go help him. And let me go back just a touch. When working for Mr. Reuter as well as for the Quality Service Contractors, it was a great opportunity to see the world, to see what different people do and how they run their businesses. It's not my way or the highway like a lot of operations are. It was fun to see the difference between the Northeast, the Southwest, and vice versa. I thoroughly enjoyed the business. It was a lot of fun. With the quality service contractors, I had the opportunity to help companies sell their company as well as other companies buy their companies. So I was a paid consultant for the quality service contractor, so they weren't paying me a finder's fee or anything like that. I was just helping them through the process. And some of them had no clue what they were getting into, which was a real concern. As you well know, Adam, it's a challenge at times.
Indeed. Well, and to kind of segue off from there, Lawrence, what were some of the concerns that you saw out there as you were helping companies be bought or sold, and what were some of the pitfalls that you saw business owners or home service contractors getting into?
I think one of the biggest things, the downfalls were, Granddad did it this way, I'm doing it this way. The new PE companies, private equity companies, and people who are purchasing companies could care less what your grandfather did. They want you to be the 21st century. A lot of companies I worked with, I was taking them from time material to flat rate, menu pricing, and which was a real challenge for them. It was a mental block. But the technicians saw the big picture. The biggest thing was we involved their dispatchers and their CSRs saying, "You're our purchasing clients. You're the 80% of the people we deal with here. What would you like to see? Would you like to see a menu or just however long it takes?" So the faster the guy is, the less you pay, or the slower the guy is, the more you pay. So it's a real challenge, and that's the biggest thing I saw was thinking in the future instead of in the past.
Gotcha. And did you notice that when it came to the business owners themselves, and and getting prepared for, say, an acquisition, what were, aside from the fact that it was really in a lot of cases these mom and pops having to kind of grow up and start to price like an effective company and change models, what were some of the human side challenges that you ran into, beyond that?
The biggest problem was the owner was too involved with the business. Every decision was made was him. There was no leadership team. Very rarely, believe it or not, there was no financials. They didn't know their financial status. They knew their what was in the bank. That was what Granddad used to do. They run it by the seat of your pants. Today we run it off of a sheet of paper. So that was one of the biggest things. And I mean, we even had large companies that were so tightly held that if the owner happened to leave, the business would have crumbled because nobody knew where to go for the answers at that point.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so my question then from there is, so it sounds like what you're saying is that first and foremost, if it's just you running the show and you really don't have anybody managing the operations of your business, say a service manager, that sort of thing, it's really, really tough to exit a business, I would say, is kind of to reiterate your point there. And then my other question is you talked about the financials quite a bit, and that you really can't be running your business by the bank accounts. And my question to you is simply, when somebody's considering selling a business or a plumbing business in particular, what are those kind of key ratios that they ought to be focused on in terms of their P&L health?
Realistically, the bottom line is key. One of the first things that people ask you from a private equity company, and me, 'cause I have bought several companies myself, is what are your sales? How many people do you have working for you? At that point, I can tell you what your sales should be as compared to what they are. And then what's your bottom line after depreciation and amortization? Most accounting firms don't put that in there on a monthly basis. It's a yearly entry.
Gotcha.
So some
Okay.
people think they're doing extremely well, and you figure in all their new vehicles and equipment, and it just demolishes their bottom line.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. So the less debt you have, the better is the short of it, right?
Not necessarily. Debt's good. You want to use debt to grow your business. So yeah, I mean, I just assume do everything cash, and that's what we do at Valley Plumbing at this point.
Sure.
But some people need that little kick of a bank, and with them literally in your back pocket, that's key to sort of growing your business.
Gotcha. And you mentioned before that if you know the number of employees, then you have a pretty good idea of how much revenue they should be churning. And I've heard a lot about this in the both the HVAC and plumbing space in terms of what's that average revenue per technician that a company ought to be bringing in. And I'm curious from your experience what you find those numbers to be, or when you're looking from just somebody's profit and loss and knowing how many employees they have. What is a good revenue per employee number?
I normally look at just doing some calculations real quick. I normally look at this point on the plumbing side of things at about $200,000 per employee. Now that includes your CSRs, the owner, the accounting people, everybody that makes your business move forward. That would not include your outside accounting firm, but if you had outside CSRs and dispatchers, it would include them.
Okay. And do you have an idea of per plumber, what type of revenue a plumber should be generating on an annual basis?
Well, let's look at ratios more than anything else at that point. The typical office to field ratio to be optimum taking care of your customers is normally about a 3-to-1 ratio, and sometimes can be as high as a 4-to-1, depending how automated you are and how well your marketing department does for you. So I don't know if I've answered that question. I would want to see a minimum of $500,000 out of a technician, or out of a truck. Let's put it that way, out of a truck, because a lot of the trucks that I've had in my businesses have had 2 guys in them, one apprentice and one journeyman, because we grow our own at this point.
You bring up a really, really interesting point in that in terms of growing your own. And obviously, if you've been in this business for a while, you understand that we do have a pretty significant labor shortage when it comes to skilled technicians, whether that be plumbing or heating and air or whatever else. Really quick, before I segue into that, I know you do plumbing and you also do excavation. Are you guys in the heating and air space as well?
Our business in Tyler, Texas, that I just barely sold, does do air conditioning as well as electrical.
Okay, gotcha.
In my company in Las Vegas, we did electrical, HVAC, excavation, new construction. We did everything.
Okay. Very cool. So circling back really quick on the development of people, the labor shortage that kind of exists in the home services space, what have you found has been the best way to try to cultivate people? Are you getting them just off the street? Are you hiring them out of schools and then training them up? What has been the Valley Plumbing formula for that?
Yes, and yes. If you're a journeyman coming off the street that wants, or a plumber coming off the street that wants a job, yeah, we'll interview you. But it really depends who you've worked for, whether we even consider you. Because the first thing we've got to do is beat the stupid out of you. And I don't want to be negative when I say that, but some companies are so aggressive at sales. That's not us. And that's kind of what's put us on the map and has kept our marketing down as low as it is. Some companies are 12, 15, 16% marketing, and we're significantly less than that. But as far as hiring, a lot of it comes from referrals from people who already work for us. They know somebody just graduated from high school or just is wanting to change jobs, things like that. We bring them in. We hire for your abilities. We ask you some weird questions, and some of those weird questions are, if your car broke down, would you try to fix it? Would you change your own oil? That tells you they're a little mechanically inclined. What classes did you take in high school or college? I mean, I encourage you to go to college. I have a 2-year degree. I mean, it's not much, but it made my parents happy at the time. So, and it was good to have. I've taken a lot of community education classes since then. But we hire for their attitude. If they've got a great attitude, I'll put them on. Sometimes you have to take them out in the warehouse and show them how to use a broom and how to use a shovel, because they've never done that before. It's a little bit different. So one of the first things we'll do is put them on an excavation crew, and they learn real quick how to use a shovel and a broom. But if they're not well-rounded in the trades, then they're probably not going to want to work for us. In fact, we won't have them work for us. And we can tell within the first 2 or 3 months if that person is going to be a person we want to keep. If not, unfortunately, we have to give them their freedom and let them go somewhere else.
Sure, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And have you, when you've acquired companies in the past, and you've done some acquisitions, right?
Yes, uh-huh.
What has been your experience in terms of the personnel there? You know, the people in the trucks, and have you found that you're usually able to incorporate all of those people in without having to make any serious changes, or has it been kind of a case by case basis in terms of, well, we've got some bad apples here, but great apples over there?
Yes and yes. Some of the acquisitions we've done were a real challenge. We saw it as an opportunity to get into a certain area that we weren't
Hmm.
in one of the operations here in Utah. They were not the culture was significantly different. They would shut their business for a week for deer hunt. We can't shut our customers down because half a dozen people go deer hunting, but they shut their entire business down.
Hmm.
Great operation, don't get me wrong, but we had to bring them to what we say is our mentality. They weren't in uniforms, so we got them uniforms. We had to buy all new trucks. We got them brand new trucks in inventory. The company, one of the two companies I bought in Texas, was operating just like us because they were one of my consulting clients. So they were operating real similar to what we had here, and it was just to bring a new manager in because the old manager down there, old owner, was retiring. But the other company we bought down there in Texas, which is just a sole air conditioning company, was a challenge as well because they were Levi's and T-shirt type guys,
Hmm.
and about a third the price is what we are at Sea Woods. So we had to show them their value. They all got increases in pay. So they had to look at the big picture instead of beer to beer, like your typical worker does. So, and we do a lot of financial training for our guys, so they know where the company is, where they stand, what their piece of the action looks like. So that's kind of how we do our training moving forward on the financial side of things. But again, one of the biggest things if you're doing an acquisition is make sure the new company looks and feels like your company. If not, it's going to be a real challenge.
So that brings me up a really, really interesting, point in all of that, and that comes to culture. Really, I think is what you're talking about here. And when it comes to culture, what do you see as being some of the key things that you look for if you're going to acquire a business?
Well, the way I understand, or the way I look at culture is I go out and have the parking lot discussions. I've done training with Mr. Reuter as well as the QSC and technician training and sales training and technical training as needed. But I go out in the parking lot, just shoot the bull with the technicians or ride with them too. I do a lot of ride-alongs, and that's you kind of get they're going to open up to you when you're sitting next to them in the truck. And again, if the culture's not there, meaning if the guys are out for themselves, and a lot of the plumbers that we have come in looking for work right now, they're all out for themselves. You want to make sure that they're a team player. Yes, the company has to be part of that team process, but the technician in your team have to be on board. I mean, there was a time with Valley Plumbing where we were going through technicians like they were going out of style,
Hmm.
and we didn't have that culture. And we just sat down with my son Rob and just said, we've got to change something. And Robbie came up with a plan, and it worked. We can't get rid of them now, which is a good thing.
So, or would you be open to sharing your secret to success there?
Parties, and parties. Breakfast once a month. Birthdays, we celebrate birthdays. We in our meetings, we're a rah type of a company in meetings. I mean, we hand out a lot of cash bonuses for the guys. Of course, there's an in and out on their payroll, so it's all legit. But everybody's clapping. If somebody gets a great review, everybody's clapping. So you got the 60 people clapping for one guy, and everybody wants to be in the limelight. So those are the kind of things that really stick out, and it goes against my grain, but it's just not me. It's hey, you did a good job, thanks, but you should know that already because the customer just told you that. But everybody else needs to tell them thanks too, and that's really made a significant difference. Great vehicles, great inventory systems. If you open up a truck, which I love to do every time I was down in Houston a few weeks ago at some meetings, open up the back of one of the guy's trucks. He says, "Oh yeah, I've been really busy." You know what? That dirt and the concrete has been on the floor of your truck for weeks and weeks. And I said, "How long ago was it you did that concrete work?" He said, "Oh, it was just a couple of days ago." And his manager was right there. I said, "How long ago was it really he did that job?" He says, "About 3 weeks ago." So they have pride in their vehicles when they're nice vehicles, and the managers make sure the vehicles when they're leaving we have meetings once a week, and before the trucks leave the office, they have to be inspected. And I want to look at it. I want the managers to look at it from a customer perspective. How many times do you see a construction truck with plans in the windows and coffee cups in the windows and pipe hanging off the outside of their trucks and things like that?
I really, really like what you have to say around all of that. And for me, some of the key takeaways that I heard just first and foremost is it's really about people first. And I think there's just this reality that most when I talk with technicians in plumbing or for that matter, startups, the common experience that seems to be unanimous amongst most startup plumbing companies or HVAC companies is that you have somebody who, frankly, was treated poorly by their organization. They got pissed off, and they said, I don't know why I'm doing this and making these guys all of this money. I can go out and do it on my own. And some of them are successful, some of them are not. But whether they are or they are not, the fact of the matter is that that's why how most companies get started, in my experience, anyway. And I talk to a lot of startups. And what I really appreciated about what you had to say was that first and foremost, you really appreciate your employees. And I think that acknowledgement that you talked about there, and not only, hey, congratulations, you got a customer review, but making that into a big thing and having parties, celebrating birthdays. Those are the soft touches that I think really, really make a difference in people wanting to stick around for the long term. Because let's be real about it, the nature of things now is that people don't stay in a career for 30 years. They hop from place to place to place every few years, and especially where you're putting all of this energy and time and money into cultivating these people and pulling them out of high school or pulling them immediately out of trade school, sticking them in another truck with another plumber. You're talking now that ratio per truck essentially declines a little bit. And so you're making an investment in those people. And that's where I see a lot of organizations, frankly, go wrong, is they just don't value their employees that much. And then the other thing that I heard too, that I want to just point on, is that, and you didn't say this expressly, but there's really a lot of core values instillment in the way that it sounds like you're managing the operation there at Valley Plumbing. And as far as what I gather from you is that you care about the people, and I think that your history of being involved in this industry for as many years as you have, kind of what I kept hearing was that I loved working with people from this region and that region and here and there, and getting that feel of difference. And I think that is one particular core value that I could hear in terms of that instillment. Professionalism was another one. Operational excellence was another core value that came out of that for me, in terms of making sure that our fleet looks incredible, our trucks look great, and they're going to be memorable and noticeable out on the road. And I think so many startup companies, especially, or companies that just don't get it, have what I like to think of as just a mediocre brand. And that's kind of what we're really talking about at the end of the day, is that the brand of Valley Plumbing is that you have a certain expectation, and that expectation is going to be professionalism. It's going to be that we care about our employees. We want them around for the long term, because also too, and you know this as well as I do, people keep coming back to your organization because of the experience that they have. And it's that book of business that you start to build over time by doing excellent service work, that really helps to bring those marketing expenses down. Because if I'm using Google Ads or other, expensive media to generate new customers, but I have no lifetime value from that customer, because frankly, we're a burn and churn shop, and we are just, we're there for the money. We burn and churn our employees. We burn and churn pretty much everything. And those companies exist. And in fact, there's some right here in our market that you and I both could say, and I won't throw it out there, because my goal is not to, necessarily create enemies in the, where we are. But the fact of the matter is that certain companies develop a reputation over time for being that high sales, burn and churn. We don't care about our customers. We don't care about our employees. And I think that circling back to the whole point of of kind of this, podcast and acquisition and talking about acquisitions, those things, that culture is going to come out in, I believe, the multiplier that you can ultimately receive as a business, because it's not just about the numbers. I've worked with enough private equity companies to know that even in the case of private equity, they're really looking at that brand as a whole. And for me, what that brand really is it goes far beyond the trucks and your logos and your wraps and things along those lines. And it really is about what is the culture of the company. And I have noticed personally that smart private equity will do everything possible to maintain that culture of the company. Whereas, there's burn and churn private equity out there too, if I'm being honest. And I know that you've had some experience with that as well. And I'd love to hear more about, how, what some of the, we're talking about Valley is this, I think, great case study of what a company can be. And I know that you guys are very successful here in our local market. What have you seen out there in terms of bad acquisitions or of, say, private equity or other type venture capital that doesn't value these things, and how that really works out in the M&A space?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. And let me go back just a touch on you mentioned culture starts with the image of the company and then the image of the technician. And you haven't been to our office, Adam. If you walk in our technician area, there's a dummy, literally a dummy there, dressed up like a technician. It says, here's what you're supposed to look like. And so every once in a while, just for fun, if a guy comes in with his shirt untucked, I say, let's go stand over by Fred over here and see what it looks like. So, but Robbie and I cook breakfast for our entire team. We cook it. We don't bring it in. We cook it. And it gives us the opportunity because they have to stand in front of us for 30 seconds or whatever the heck it is. We're shooting the bull with them, asking about their families. We know most of their kids because we have parties a couple times a year with their families. We don't just do it with them, it's with their families. And we'll rent out Boondocks, which is a family fun center, that type of thing. And we're going to a big Christmas party, but we involve the families with that mentality because their families are what really keeps them coming to work most of the time. So, but again, those little soft touches are what makes a big, big difference. But you mentioned the PE companies, and that's been a real challenge. When we were interviewing companies in Tyler, Texas, to purchase our company, and again, we sold it about 3 months, or I sold it about 3 months ago. And my partner Mark is still there. He was a minority partner, and he worked for me in Las Vegas for about 15 years as well at our company there. But it was interesting seeing and talking. The first thing I had to do is I need to have a list of companies you've purchased and their phone numbers of their senior management. And I said, I don't want their office number. I want their cell numbers. And a couple of them wouldn't give me that information. And we cut the ties immediately. But I did some research on them, and the companies they just bought because of their revenue. That's all they bought. Some of the companies out there, they lack leadership. They have the only vision they have is bottom line vision. And if you're not a 20% bottom line operating company after depreciation and amortization, they're not interested in you because all they look at is bottom line. And again, a private equity company, they report to a management team. And if you're not bringing that bottom line revenue in, things are going to change. Heads are going to roll. It's different than a private company because we try to make changes. If it doesn't work, then heads roll. They don't even try to make changes. They just make heads roll and say the changes will follow. It's like buying a new company for myself. You got to make sure the culture matches. I went and visited several companies in the Dallas area, in Salt Lake area, that some of the companies I had interviewed, they had purchased. And boy, I tell you, some of those companies, we were within 2 weeks of closing with a company at Sea Woods down in Tyler. And I went by and saw their operations, one in Dallas and a couple here in Salt Lake area, and even one over in Denver. And I just said, this isn't for us. I can't do this to my employees. They're what put us there. I owned the company for 7 years down there, and we took it from $1.5 million up to $12 million in sales. And it wasn't because of us; it was because of them. And the PE companies, all they saw was bottom line revenue, and they saw, I can add this much to my balance sheet and make our head honchos look better. If I don't own the company, they can do whatever the heck they want. But I have this kind of drive in me. I've lived here in Utah, and went down to our Texas operation 3 or 4 times a year. That's all I was down there. Quite often, I'd pick up the phone and give a technician a call or text them and say, "Hey, great job, keep it up." When I got their weekly numbers, just for something to do. Every once in a while, you get somebody, a new guy that says, "Who is this?" That means I failed. But do you think a PE company would do that?
It has not been my experience.
There are a few good ones out there.
Gotcha. If I'm looking at selling my plumbing company, what should I be looking for in a private equity company that is going to come in and purchase us, and whether I'm staying or I'm not staying? What do you think? I mean, because as far as I'm concerned, it isn't just about the revenue. It isn't just about the profit or EBITDA. At the end of the day, it's if I've built this business, or let's say that I'm you and I've built Valley Plumbing and I'm looking at selling Valley Plumbing, I want to know that culture is going to continue to exist. And I want to know that my employees are going to continue to be taken care of. And obviously in your case, where you are such an employee centric, people first type business, what would you look for in a private equity company to ensure that they don't just come in and essentially just bastardize the business?
You got to look at the owner first. Now, me being the owner, and if all I'm looking for is the money, get the highest bid and get the heck out of there. And you screw the rest of your employees. That's what a lot of the PE company or a lot of the owners do, because they could care less. They want their millions or whatever it's going to be, and they're done. But half these guys know where I live. I can't do that to them. It's their livelihood. It's their families. So don't be scared to ask the hard questions. And keep in mind, you're talking to a sales guy. When you talk to that PE guy, he is the sales guy. He's going to tell you what you want to hear. Again, interview their lower end people. Get their telephone numbers. If they won't give them to you, sorry, we're not going to do business. Go someplace else. I went through 12 companies before I narrowed it down to 2. And one of them, we cut the sheets right before we closed, a couple of weeks before we closed. And the other one was a good acquisition. I felt very comfortable with it. There's a few questions I should have asked that didn't, but now I'm back with them doing some little bit of consulting with them, helping to integrate some of their other operations. But if you don't feel comfortable, use your women's intelligence, your God-given intelligence. And if it sounds too good to be true, it really is. Most of us have been in the business forever. We know what's possible and what's not. If they say, "Oh, we're employee-centered people, we do this, we do that," well, tell me what you do for them that's different than what I do. If you're going to think you're at this level and we're at this level, what's between those two levels? And if you don't feel comfortable with it, sleep on it, unless you're only looking for the money.
Well, and I hope that people listening to this, even if they are interested in the money, would still recognize that more often than not, when I talk with a plumbing contractor, they have an idea of, for the ones that want to be acquired, right, or the ones who really are looking for that 7 or even 8-figure payout. The money is certainly important, but there's a gap between where they are now and where they really want to be. And my belief is that you can't cross that gap without these fundamental core values, a significant operating plan, and things along those lines. And so what I like about what I've heard you say here is, it's like, even if your goal is just I'm gonna cut and run, I think it makes a lot of sense to really look at what am I selling in addition to the business that is going to be able to hopefully survive out into perpetuity from all of this. And I think the other point that I'd like to make there too is just that there's all sorts of things that can be done, and you can run that burn and churn type shop and really just focus on the bottom line and cook a business that way with the ultimate intention of getting that highest dollar out of it. But at the end of the day too, you're going to that it comes out sideways. It comes out sideways in bad reviews. It comes out sideways in your reputation in the local marketplace. And I think that those things really hurt brands over time, frankly. And so I would just encourage anybody that's listening now to, really consider what you had to say about all of this in as far as just it really is about the culture, and it really is about building a business that is going to just be excellent in the marketplace, frankly. And so I want to maybe move away from that just a little bit and ask you. I know that you guys had a potential acquisition that really didn't work out because you ultimately decided that you were not going. It just wasn't the right fit culturally, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
We met with the president of the company and their leadership team, and all they did was beat their chests. They didn't really want to know much about our company. We spent about 5 minutes telling them about our company. And then they went around the circle in their little room, in the room we were in, and just beat their chests. We do this for employees, we do that for employees. And I was taking notes. And when it was all done, I said, what you said is all good and well, but what are you going to do to change the culture in our company to make it better? Because right now we really have a great culture here. And you say you're all customer centered, you do this, you do that. There's only one of two ways you're going to make your private equity firm happy. One is to increase prices. Two is to reduce wages. There's only those two to do it. Only those two ways. You can increase marketing and hope it brings in more revenue, which brings in a little bit more to the bottom line. But they look more at percentages of the bottom line than they do dollars and cents. And they couldn't answer those questions. And it was very tough questions. And when one of them finally had the HR gal, when she started answering questions, I said, what's the hiring process? Well, first of all, you have to go through us to do this, do this, do this, do this. And we'll do the first 2 interviews, and then we'll turn it over to you guys. No, I'm going to hire fast, because if somebody's looking, somebody else is going to make them an offer in a few minutes. We're in the service business. We're not in the new construction business. So right. that was one of the biggest problems, is they were beating themselves, beating their own drums, but they really weren't going to offer us anything that we already have. And at the end of the day, it was a mutual agreement that we didn't go down the path together. They felt they had some changes to do, and I felt that it wasn't the right fit for our people. Yes, I'm selling. I retired. Most people who sell their businesses, they want them there, or else it severely reduce what they're going to get for their companies.
Sure, absolutely. And ultimately, you decided to kind of go a different direction. It sounds like, and you can correct me where I'm wrong here anyway, but I know that you are currently doing what a lot of my clients really have set up their plumbing businesses to do, which is to be able to hand it down to family and have the next generation of Snows, running the thing forward and creating that family owned business that stays privately held and gets handed down kind of generationally. And I'd love to hear more about what you're doing there and kind of your philosophy around how to structure a transaction or how to structure a buyout when it comes to family. Because I know of at least one client just in the last 6 months that is trying to do exactly this. And I see it happen quite a bit. And I'd really love to hear your experience on that.
One of the things we did, and again, we had my son, Robbie, who's my number 2 son. My number 1 son, who was a CPA, worked for us as well. He handled all of our operations. And then my daughter, her husband worked for us as well. So my son-in-law, he handled everything that moves, all of the vehicles, the inventory. That was his job. So 3 totally separate jobs.
Gotcha.
They started to mingle. It's a great success story if people stay in their own lanes, and they didn't. So we had a rock solid buy-sell agreement. Yes, there's always holes in that agreement. But at the end of the day, one of them has to have the rights of first refusal. And that was Rob. And with some discussions, it was determined that the other 2 would be leaving. But Robbie's the right answer. He's a master plumber. I shouldn't say that he's followed in his dad's footsteps and run a very successful business, but I don't run successful businesses. The people who work for me do. I just sit and watch it happen and applaud them as they go and say, "I told you so." If it doesn't work,
Well, you also create the framework for them to be able to thrive, and I think that's an important aspect of leadership. We use a methodology at Job Calls called the entrepreneurial operating system that comes from the book Traction. And one of the tenets of this is what we call a level 10 or an L10 meeting. And the whole idea behind this, and this has been kind of an interesting thing for me as a leader, because I've always looked at things from a not a command control perspective, but like I set the vision. I'm constantly pushing people to the vision, and I'm really the driver in all of this. But there's this reality that as a leader, and as we've implemented this system at Job Calls, I've really become more of a facilitator. And it's really my job to set the culture and set the vision for the company, but then turn that over to my people and say, all right, guys, now let's creatively come up with how we're going to do this. And so it's really, that's, it sounds like that's kind of what you're doing here too. I think it's a little bit more than sitting back and watching everybody, run. And I think that what I've heard from you is that you're really laying that groundwork for the culture so that people can operate autonomously and do so using their own, best intuition. And you become more of a guide at that point than a ruler, I think is the point that I'm trying to get at.
yeah, somebody has to be the visionary, and not somebody. And
Hmm.
there can be more visionary ideas, but the team has to come together to say, "Hey, here's an idea. Here's a thought. What do you think?" Get people's input, and not too many people input, because you get too many, it just creates confusion. And then build the plan, work the plan. And people say, "Lawrence, you've always been successful." Well, I put the target down there. I shoot the gun and go down and move the target, and I hit a bullseye almost every time. But Robbie's done a great job. Now, have I agreed with everything he's done for the last 6 years? He's pretty much run the place. Absolutely not. I mean, sometimes I go home and kick the dog. You know what I mean?
I do.
So the
And I've
dog
met
knows.
your dogs too, so I know exactly what you mean.
I've got a big dog now, so he's not very happy about that. But you kind of get the idea that not everything is the way I want it. It's I mean, I just retired. Rob's early 40s. So he's got a lot of years left in him, and it's a different environment. I mean, to give people a present on their birthday, are you flipping kidding me? But you know what? It worked. If that's what makes you happy, go buy something and give it to them for their birthday. And everybody claps and carries on. And every once in a while, you get somebody singing happy birthday. It's embarrassing to listen to everybody sing. But you get the idea that to have that vision moving forward is what makes your team what a team is. Quite often, Robbie and I will sit out back of my house, and unfortunately, he's my next door neighbor now. But we'll sit out back by the fire. We got a fire pit out there, and just brainstorm the next thing. And at the end of the day, sometimes you come up with nothing. At the end of the day, we come up with a lot of ideas, and we take that back to the team and say, "Hey, here's some thoughts. What are you thinking?" But again, with your team, you've always got to have an open door. Robbie's on vacation right now. I don't own the company anymore. But one of his team members called me this morning before this meeting and said, "Hey, I've got an idea," and brought it here. Here's the thoughts. Here's the ideas, and he sent it to me in an email. Thought that's really cool. This guy has it. This is our next manager, one of our next managers. So, and he's thinking about it. Sometimes they have no clue. You go through the financial aspect with them, and the who, what, where, when, and why mentality. And sometimes they think, yeah, you're probably right. It's going to cost too much, and the ROI, return on your investment, is not going to be there. But sometimes the return on my investment is not the important thing, because if I do the right thing, if I stop chasing money, money will start chasing me. You have to have a clear vision, and your people have to know what that vision is. Do
Yeah.
we do that at Valley Plumbing real well? No, nobody does it real well. I think we do it better than most. To have that core values up on your wall, I could ask every one of my guys what our core values are. They would never be able to quote that core values, and they see that sign every single week when they come in the office, every week. But not one of them could tell you what the core values are or our mission statement. But you have to live and breathe your core values. If you make that challenge, one of the companies here in town, his neighbors will not let their company come and work for them because he's taken advantage of all of his neighbors.
Hmm.
One of the things you've got to do on core values, that this isn't core values within me, and it's core values in my neighborhood too. I do work for most of my neighbors here, and sometimes I'll go do it myself, and sometimes they just need a little help. Sometimes I'll see one of my trucks up the street, and I give them a significant discount. Man, there's your core values right there. That your customers come first, but they're your best advertising people too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing too that Robbie then probably has these same core values instilled, and it sounds like really you've been able to just develop that culture to where it's now going to continue on into the future.
He does it much better than I did.
That's kind of what we all want, isn't it?
It is scares me
For our
sometimes.
children is to that they have an easier life, or at least they can outdo us, at the end of the day. And yeah, I was fortunate to get to work with my father for many years. He's since passed, but he was an entrepreneur, and so one of my first work experiences for really the first 10 years of my working career, I got to run a professional employer organization with him. And it was so interesting too, because it was less about, he was a CPA by trade. And so he very much ran business by the numbers. But he had this core value that I understand now, and maybe didn't then, of what I like to refer to as humble confidence. And he was very confident in what he did, but he was more confident in his people. And they would hire right, they would hire based on cultural fit, and then he would continue to provide that guidance and that vision. But it was really about letting those people shine and letting those people really thrive, because I think he recognized, and I think I'm hearing that same kind of quality in you as well, that you can only know so much, and you can only be an expert in so many things. And if you hire motivated people and you give them this space within the contracts, the construct of your process and your culture and everything else, but you give them the space to come to the table with ideas and to do some of these other things, that's really how your organization is going to thrive, because we don't know everything as leaders of our businesses. We just don't.
One of the biggest
Go ahead.
keys to success, I took an entrepreneurship class in Las Vegas, and they had us come up with 3 business successes that we had to interview business leaders throughout the city. And I mean, here I was, people were looking up to me because there was a bunch of snot-nosed kids in my community college class, and I was the adult there. They thought I was the teacher, but I was there to learn. But 3 things is share the wealth, make accounting top priority, and hire people more knowledgeable than yourself.
Yeah.
So many of us try to hire an accounting person. I mean, you were talking about your dad a minute ago, just
Mhm.
a bookkeeper. That's not what you need. You need a full-fledged 4 year, sometimes even 5 year degree person. They don't have to be a CPA. However, they need to know the numbers,
Right.
and it will revolutionize your business, because that's one less thing you have to worry about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's complicated. I mean, how often do I really look at a cash flow statement? It's like I spend a lot of time in my P&Ls, of course. But yeah, there's, and I feel like I'm I did all of this in my bachelor's and my MBA and whatever. And I feel like I'm pretty good at understanding the accounting of a business. And I have a great CPA who also does my bookkeeping as well. And frankly, I would miss so much in terms of understanding what those healthy ratios are on my profit and loss, and forecasting for the future in terms of what our financial needs are going to be. So I guess just to kind of start winding this down here anyway, we've talked a lot about culture, we've talked a lot about private equity, we've talked a lot about financials and things along these lines. And just to kind of circle back to somebody who would be watching this podcast because they are interested in selling their business, or they are interested in maybe handing that down to the next generation of family who's going to continue to take this ongoing concern and move it down the road. What advice would you give somebody where they could, over the next few years, implement some of these things and really have a successful sell of their business?
I think that one of the biggest things is you have to create systems. I'm not talking SOPs. I'm not talking all that rot. You got to have a budget. That's the most nauseating thing I do every year is a budget. But you have to have the numbers readily available. One of the things the PE companies talked to me about when the 12 I interviewed and sent financials to them to see if they were at all interested is how quickly I had the available documentation that they needed. It was if they asked for financials and tax returns and this and that, within 10 minutes it was on their email. So you have to know your numbers. You have to know where your company is and what your future looks like, what your past was. But then when you get in bed with a PE company or somebody's going to purchase your company, they're going to ask you some questions that are going to drive you to drinking really, really heavy. And you're going to feel like you want to kill somebody. I mean, it's just stupid some of the questions they ask, but somebody up there in the ivory office, ivory tower, has to ask these questions to make themselves feel needed, and just to make you mad. And that's really what happens. Some of the questions I was asked, I finally just said, "Look, I am not going to waste my time because you're wasting your time as well asking me that question. What's the need of that information for an acquisition? It means nothing." So I think again, know your numbers, know where you are. You need to be able to go on a 1 week vacation without calling the office. And again, Robbie's on a 1 week vacation right now. I bet he's called 15 times at the office. Of course, he's at Disneyland and those kind of places. So yeah, I can see his pain with four daughters. But he can sing the "It's a Small World" off by heart now. So
There you go. These are life skills that we don't think about very often, but very, very
that's right.
important.
The biggest key is you got to be able to leave town, because if you are such an integral part of your business, a PE company, a private equity company is going to come in and buy you, really don't want you. They don't want you there. You need to be able to say, "I'm going to stay for a couple of years during the transition and then be able to leave. And these are my three choices for my position, or four choices, or whatever." And you can't hum and you have to have it clear cut, and it needs to be written down. Because if it's not written down, as you well know, it's never going to happen because you're going to change your mind. Don't be embarrassed to go down and move the target. If something doesn't work, business isn't perfect. There's if there was one book, it would be perfect. There's millions of business books out there, and read them all. Read them all. Go to seminars. Get away from your office. Join peer groups. Join associations that have monthly meetings. Rub shoulders with the best of the best. Our peer group that we were at in Houston a few weeks ago, Rob and I, we've got one guy that's 30 million in sales there. We've got companies that are there's 9 companies, I believe there is, and I think the smallest company we have is 7 million. So they're all about the same size and demographics, and it's interesting seeing what they do. Yes, have they all been approached about selling? Yes, 2 of them have sold and got their businesses back in the early 2000s. But you have to rub shoulders with the best of the best, because you're on an island. If not,
Yeah.
you gotta get outside your box. I don't care if you go knock on somebody's door in your local area. When I was in Las Vegas, I pick up the phone, give somebody a call in Denver or Atlanta or whatever, and say, "Hey, I'm going to be in the area. Can I stop by and see your company? I'm from Las Vegas." And almost without exception, they say, "Sure. You want us to make reservations for you at a hotel, or what's your preferences?" And when we have people come to our office, and we've had it done in our Texas operation as well, people come there and do the same exact thing. They think they're getting so much information from us. It's actually, we learn more from them. I do require our people to travel somewhere at least once a year to somebody's office and spend at least 2 days on the ground learning what other companies do. They come back with wild ideas. They have to come back with 3 ideas, minimum 3 ideas, and put one of them into place within a month.
That's awesome. And you've found that other plumbing companies are pretty receptive of that, especially if you're going to come right around in a truck and do work for a few days.
without exception. I want to learn this stuff out in the field. It's all the same. I mean, some ways how they present their pricing and things like that's a little bit different, which is okay. I want to learn. I want to learn about what they do in their office. I want to talk to their managers, the owner for a while. I want to talk to their CSRs, dispatchers, to see their thoughts behind it. But yes, I do like to drive with technicians. I have a lot of fun doing it.
Well, that's fantastic, and I really just want you to know that I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and because you've been at this for a while, obviously, and have been involved in. What's that now?
Are you saying I'm old?
Not at all. Not at all. Seasoned. Was
there you go. There you go. Politically correct.
I've got a lot of gray happening myself here, so I feel like I'm getting a little bit more seasoned every day. Alas, and my self-care routine has had to go up pretty substantially. But I think just to kind of recap everything here, what I've heard you really say is that focus on your financials, focus on your people. Focus on building a system and a business that will run really, really well. Make sure that you've got the management in place. And I love this too. You talked about business books. The E-Myth was one that kind of kept coming up for me as I was listening to you talk. And this idea about you have to remove yourself from the operations of the business, or you really don't have anything that you can sell because you are the business. And I think that that's so important for plumbers to recognize, because they do usually start out because they're upset about their current employment situation, and they just want to go out there and make 150 grand a year or whatever that number is, but don't necessarily think about the future of all of this and stepping away and being able to retire at some point. And it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that in order to be able to do that, you really do need to create a culture and a vision for that company that doesn't involve you in the day-to-day operations of it.
That is correct. Make them do their jobs that you hired him for. It's okay for them to ask you questions, but sometimes answering a question with a question is the right answer, because then they don't come back again.
I really like that. Answering a question with a question. Well, Lawrence, thank you so much for joining me here on the Home Services Marketing Growth to Acquisition podcast. This has been absolutely tremendous for me, and I'm sure it will be for my listeners as well. And I just want to, again, just thank you and appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate being here, Adam.
So if you're looking for more industry, advice and tips or actionable insights, be sure to join the Job Calls On-Call newsletter at oncall.jobcalls.com. And again, I'm Adam Loveridge with Job Calls. This is the Home Services Marketing Growth to Acquisition podcast, and I look forward to catching you next time.